Micah.
Keep looking.
Live. All right. Welcome back to Faith Family United Church of Christ Bible Study 101, where we're going to be going through the Bible, each book, and hitting the highlights of each book. If you'd like to review, go to our YouTube page, and we have all of the lessons all the way up to today, which we'll be doing Micah. We're wrapping up. We're getting close to wrapping up the prophets.
Jonah, Micah, way back. Just go back.
All right. So, as you can see, we're in Micah, and Micah is part of the 12, or also known as the minor prophets. And we've already talked about how the minor prophets aren't just minor because of their importance, but they're minor because the books are short. So the major prophets are a lot longer. Isaiah, for example, is probably generational and just use the same name, Isaiah. Ezekiel, Lamentations, Jeremiah, those are very long. So we are in Micah, and you can see Micah, the time frame is between 750 and 700 BC. Okay, this would be right around the time of Jotham, Jeroboam II, and before the fall in 720. It would have been before the fall of northern Israel, and Judah, of course, is the south. So northern, it would have been before the fall of Israel, which was taken away to the Assyrian. Okay, and here you go. Here's Nineveh. We talked about Nineveh the other day when we talked about Jonah. And that's where, and here's Jerusalem, Tyre, Sidon, Egypt's down here, and this of course is kind of the Fertile Crescent, and this is all of Assyria's power when they were the top. Of course, later on, the Babylonians are going to come up here, going to come up through here again, and they're going to take over Assyria and then all of their kingdom. And that's going to be when Judah gets taken away. Okay. So this is kind of a modern day. You can see Nineveh's up there by Mosul, Baghdad right here. That's the capital of Iraq right now. Najaf, Al-Qut, just east of Al-Qut, right here on the border. I had a very interesting, we were flying up the border, so we were kind of skirting the border just to see what it was like. And we come across a fortress out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's desert. You see some wadis where the water runs off, makes big canyons and stuff. And then all of a sudden you see this fortress out in the middle of nowhere. It kind of reminded me of like Beauchest, the French Foreign Legion. Let's just put a fortress out here anyway. Anyway, that was kind of interesting. But that's just east of Al-Qut now. So, but anyway, this is what we're talking about. Assyria was from up here, and they come across and down into Israel. Okay, so the book of Micah starts out where it says Micah is from the town of Morsheth, which is down here. Here's Jerusalem. Here's Morsheth. So he's kind of a rural area, a lot like Amos. Okay, Amos was from, where's Amos? Here's Amos right here. And this is Amos's homeland, but he's south and east of Jerusalem. And so these aren't the city prophets, these are the local prophets. And one of the things that they like to prophesy about is the corruption of the prophets that are at the temple and under the control or under the fingers of the rulers. And so we'll get into that in a little bit because Micah has some unkind words for them. So that's the background of it. I wanted to show you this. This is pretty cool here. They do cartoons, and it explains the books for you. This is BibleProject.com, and each one of these little squares, the guy actually draws it as he's talking, but he goes through the book of Micah and tells you everything that's in it and the major highlights, kind of like what we're doing, but he does it in a cartoon form, and it's pretty cool. I found that up the other day, so put that on there. Okay, so the word of Micah, the word of the Lord comes to Micah of Morsheth. That's that little town. Like Amos, Micah seems to not place himself with the prophets. Okay, so he doesn't consider him a prophet in the sense of these professional prophets. He's just like a regular guy, probably a farmer, thought he was a farmer, but God spoke to him, says, hey, go prophesy because they're doing wrong up in Jerusalem. So he's not a courtly prophet. Okay, like Amos, he is from a small town, and he sees the injustices of the ruling class. Of course, all the money and everything goes to Jerusalem and the temple, and all these cities and outside, they're faltering, right? And they're poor. They need help. Their infrastructure is running down. They need new roads. They need new bridges, but they're not getting it because we need new curtains for the temple or the palace. And then of course you have the prophets, the courtly prophets. They're saying, yes, this is what we need. This is what God wants. He wants you to build the temple because it's to God, and when really it's lining their own pockets. So, and like Amos, he prophesies against them. He says, you are the reason that Israel is going to fall. His message is one of social realignment, kind of like what we push for today, right? We want equality for all and not this hierarchy of I'm better than you because I'm a councilman, or I'm better than you because I'm a businessman. And you think about it, the one thing that always got me, when I was in the Army, I was a flight medic. And when I looked to come out of the Army and get a job as a flight medic, not paid well at all. EMTs, paramedics, not paid well at all. And you think about that, how important is those people in our society? Yeah, they're the people that are saving people's lives, but yet you treat them like
teachers.
Like what? Like teachers. Yeah, exactly. Teachers is another one. We should be paying teachers a heck of a lot more than we pay our congressmen. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Okay, the message is social alignment. He speaks both to Israel, the northern kingdom, and Judah, the southern kingdom. Even though he was from the south, you saw the map, he's from the southern kingdom, south of Jerusalem. Okay, he uses the capitals to represent the whole of that nation. So he talks, judgment is coming to Samaria and Jerusalem. Those are the capital cities of the two kingdoms. Okay, what he accuses them of: idolatry, prostitution, and accusations of injustice. That's a big one. You know, he always talks about injustices, and God's going to bring a judgment against both of the kingdoms. The people cry. Of course, the people are crying out. They're seeing the injustices and everything, and they cry out to the Lord, and the Lord sends Micah. He accuses the prophets of giving oracles or giving prophecies for money, and I love this, beer. Hey, buy me some beers and I'll give you a prophecy. So I thought that was funny. Anyway, so we have once again, this is this idea of the prophets that are the courtly prophets are just saying whatever the leaders want them to say so they can have money and, of course, beer. You do know that beer was first made by, I think it was the Assyrians. Anyway, it was made right there in the Middle East, right there. So. There's also a message of hope. I mean, Micah kind of goes back and forth. He's like, oh, God's going to destroy you. God's going to destroy the temple, which the temple ends up being destroyed. They had to rebuild it after they come back from captivity. You're going to be wiped out because of your oppressing of the people that are lower than you. The people are going to be taken away and oppressed by somebody else. So, kind of like getting their just desserts. Karma, if you will. So, but then he comes back and he has a message of hope. But God is going to return you to your land. He's going to restore you to your place. And he's going to save a remnant of the faithful, not the leadership, not the prophets that are selling their prophecies for beers, but the people that are faithful to God. And this idea of prostitution, at the time of this was written back in BC time, prostitution was often, very often, attributed to idolatry. In other words, the prostitutes would be near or around the temples. And because of that, they could say you're doing this for the gods. Okay? So, but prostitution wasn't necessarily like it is today, women on street corners or men or whoever on street corners and trying to just make money. Although they were trying to just make money, but they were doing it in a capacity that, hey, we're doing this for God or our gods. And so there's a tie between idolatry and prostitution, or prostitution and idolatry. And you see that throughout the Bible, throughout the Old Testament. You see this link between the two. They always talk about idolatry and prostitution. They go hand in hand. Like in the book of Hosea, that was his whole thing. He was to marry basically a prostitute, and it was to show that was Israel's unfaithfulness to the God, other gods, seeing other gods. But God was still faithful. Anyway, so prostitution and idolatry, they kind of run side by side. Okay, so in chapter 6, this is what one I love. It's kind of the form that it takes in the ancient Hebrew language. It kind of takes like a lawsuit. It takes on the form of a lawsuit, and it's a legal dispute. God is charging the people of Israel and Judah with breaking the covenant that they made. In other words, we had a contract and you broke it, so the penalties are, and so it sounds just like an ancient legal document that was drawn up. I thought that was really interesting because you'll see that a lot of places. Like I was talking about the book that I have that I'm reading along with this stuff. Collins, he points that out a lot of times. A lot of the things that are in the Old Testament were forms of legal documents or poems or stories that are written in a certain way, not just the Bible, but in the surrounding areas You know, so it's not just the Israel and Judah, but the surrounding areas also have writings that are very much in the same form. And this one, of course, being a legal dispute. Might suggest that there is even human sacrifices going on with the temple. That's pretty blatant if that's going on. And then again, like I said, prostitution in the temple. But we see this idea of human sacrifices elsewhere. One of the ones that we see, and God warns against it, is the Moloch, or I'm sorry, Baal. There's so many gods around that area at this time. Baal, they say that you pass your children through the fires of Baal. In other words, it's suggested, I don't know if it's ever been proven, but they have this bull, and it's basically like a big grill, and it's in the shape of a bull, and they would stoke the fire underneath the bull's belly, and then it would open up, and they would put the sacrifice in there and shut them in, and they would basically cook them to death, and they are sacrificing to bull. In Genesis 22, what do we have? Abraham getting ready to sacrifice Isaac to God. So it's not uncommon in that area. It's not uncommon for the Jewish people, the Israelites, to think of that as well. Of course, God stops him because he doesn't want sacrifice of humans. And Judges 11, you have the story of Jephthah, who goes out and prays to God and says, God, give me the strength and the ability to win this battle. And when I come home, the first thing I see from my home, I will sacrifice to you. Guess who comes out? His only daughter. It's like, and it's kind of the rest of the story gets kind of vague, you know. And so he did what he said he had to do. Now, does that mean he actually sacrificed her, or does that mean that like he made her a temple servant or something? It doesn't say. Of course, we want to say he made her a temple servant, but for the most part, he probably sacrificed. In 2 Kings 21, again, we see another example of human sacrifices being done. Now, there's an interesting thing. When we use the word cult today, it kind of means difference when we use cultus back then. A cultus was a system of religion. So if you're like Orthodox, you were in the cultus. If you weren't, then you're outside of it. But the cultus was a system of worship and a form of strict adherence to the protocols of like the temple or what happens. And it overrode the importance of your heart and your love. You know, in other words, you had to do this, then you have to do this, and then you have to do this. And so that's the cultus. Now what you'll find is, as you look at the New Testament or the Old Testament, you'll see that the cultus revolves around where? Jerusalem, the temple. Exactly. So that's where the rich people are. Rich people, hey, I'm a prophet. I'm going to go down to Miami because they got a church down there that's got 25,000 people in it, and they need a 14th minister down there to minister to the kids from 13 to 15. Okay, I'm going to go down there. That's the kind of the thing that happens. So all these people that are religious people that go there, and basically all they're doing is listening to the rulers. And so it's not the religious people that are leading, but it's what the rulers want. And so that's where Micah comes in, and he says, these guys are selling out. This indicates that people misunderstood the will of God. In other words, they thought it was step 1 to do this, step 2 to do this, step 3 to do this. Great, we're done. Let's go home, and we're good for another week or so. So God wants you to be from the heart and to live it, not just do it when you come to the temple. So that's an important message that comes from Micah. In Micah 5:2, the prophet is not only predicting the coming of the Lord's kingdom, that's important because that's what Jesus predicts too, but foretold the Christ himself was going to be born in Bethlehem. That's right. So the ruler of the new kingdom is going to be born in Bethlehem. And of course, later we see in Matthew, he actually quotes Micah 2, saying that it is in Bethlehem that he was born. And I think I got one more. Come on, you can do it. Can you change the slide for me? Thank you. Okay, and then this is the will of God. This is the will of God. Micah 8:9. If you forget everything you know about the Bible and everything you know about God, this is what God wants out of us. To do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with God, with your God. That's beautiful. I mean, that sums it all up. And that's kind of like when Jesus comes, he says, what's the greatest commandment? To love your God. The second is to love your neighbor. If you know those two things, if you do these things, you'll never go wrong when it comes to God's eyes. My battery's dead. Thank you. Okay. Any comments, questions, concerns?
Complaints?
Complaints? Need a new teacher?
It's good.
All right. That's all we got for you. Next week, I think we got Nahum. See you next week.
I guess she is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.